Well, it's only 10 months late, but it's finally here performing for you. I assume you know what a Game of the Year list is, but if somehow you don't, I'll be ranking my 10 favourite games from 2023 in order from least to most. It's not an objective ranking of quality, it's entirely based on which I enjoyed more overall, so you probably won't agree with me. That's fine though. You can make your own list if you want to, though maybe try to be a bit more on time with it than I did. Oh, and let's just get this out of the way at the start. This video isn't sponsored, but Thunderful did give me the key for SteamWorld Build, which is a game I will be talking about, so I have to mention that at some point. Before we get started, there's a few rules. I'm only including games which I finished, so even though I played a lot more games from 2023 than are included, if I don't mention it, that means I didn't finish it. I've got an honourable mention section to begin with, though some of them are definitely dishonourable, but that'll just be a brief overview of every game I finished from 2023 that isn't in the main list. Mostly, they aren't in any order except for the first three I mention and the last one. The rest of them could just float around because they're all just as good as one another. There also won't be any early access games unless they've come out since, no prologues or demos for bigger games, and no remakes in the main list. I'll stick all of those into the honourable mentions instead, which is starting in 1 second. Honourable mentions. The Light in the Darkness. Rarely has anything made me as angry as this game. As a game, it's just bad. As a historical educational tool, it's frankly insulting both to the player and everyone whose memory it's supposed to be paying tribute to. Star Wars Jedi Survivor. While the gameplay is fine, the performance started awful and has barely gotten any better since release, and the story is just plain terrible. I was hopeful after the first game, but this killed any desire I have for more from the series. Alone in the Dark Prologue. It was a vaguely interesting teaser for the new Alone in the Dark title, but I didn't even remember it enough to care when the game it was advertising actually came out. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. In some ways better than Breath of the Wild, and in other ways worse, so they average out about the same. I personally can't wait for Nintendo to get bored of this style. Terra Nil. I honestly still feel upset by this. I spent years looking forward to this relaxing, eco-minded builder, only to get exactly what I got from the demo again, except buggier and less interesting. Maybe if I hadn't played the demo in the first place I'd be more forgiving, but as it is I'm still disappointed. Word Factory. A neat little game about making words, but the combinations don't always quite make sense, and it didn't give me exactly what I wanted from my Puzzle Factory games. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. I never felt like I was really good enough to get through this. I did manage to get one ending, but that was also enough for me. There was a lot to enjoy, but ultimately it just wasn't my thing. Marvel's Spider-Man 2. While it feels great to play and the main story is good, there's a couple of side stories that just kinda stop in weird positions, and after they confirm there won't be any DLC for this game, I honestly have no idea where they'll pick those back up again, considering how this game ends. Viewfinder. Starts with some cringe dialogue and ends with a series of timed puzzles, neither of which I particularly like, but everything in between was a great mind-bending puzzle game. Grid Road. If I hadn't finished this while it was still in early access, it probably would have made the main list. It's a great puzzle game with Zachtronics vibes, and one which I only hope is even better now. Coffee Talk Episode 2, Hibiscus and Butterfly. A great follow-up to an already great visual novel, and it even removes my least favourite part of the first game. I still don't really see the point of the drinks being cryptic sometimes, though. Fire Emblem Engage. The first Fire Emblem game I actually finished, but I still prefer the others I've played overall. Nothing's ever going to beat Somi though, that thing's adorable. Like a Dragon Ishin. It took almost a decade and a full remake for this to come out outside of Japan, and I really want to break my rules and include it on the main list, but I won't. All I can hope now is that it'll convince them to eventually release Kenzan 2. Resident Evil 4 Remake. One of my favourite games of the year, and the only reason it's not on the main list is because it's a remake of one of the best games of all time, so that kind of feels like cheating. Number 10. SteamWorld Build. Special thanks to Thunderful for providing the key to this game. SteamWorld Build combines city building, mining, and tower defense into a charming package, but becomes repetitive before the end of its first map. Honestly, this is more here for what it could have been, rather than what it is. When it was first announced, this seemed like something I'd love, and the demo I played made that seem all the more likely. I like city builders, though I'm generally pretty bad at them, but tower defense games are one of my favourite genres, as you can tell just by looking at all the hours I have in Gemcraft. Better than those though, we have the mining, which reminded me heavily of LEGO Rock Raiders, an underappreciated gem which more people should play. In the full game, the combination of styles mostly gels. Building your city requires you to mine for new materials, but the further you mine, the more likely you are to find monster hives you'll need to defend your mines from. I really did enjoy all the mining until you eventually just run out of things to mine. The city building ends up feeling more like a chore the further in you get, and the tower defense waves become near constant at the end of a run. Once you're done, you'll unlock an upgrade that makes your next map a bit easier, and then you're just supposed to start again, but I had no desire to at all. It's a real shame, for as much as I was looking forward to it, and for as much fun as I had with it at times, overall it just wasn't as good as it could have been. Number 9. Tunit. Tunit puts you in the shell of a technician robot and tasks you with fixing the network in a post-apocalyptic cave system. What begins as a quiet contemplative journey to bring all the nodes back online eventually starts getting pretty uncomfortable as you search for all the mainframes and explore each new area. It only gets worse as you meet the denizens of these depths, but that's not even the scariest part of the game. No, the true terror comes from setting up all of the necessary filters. Tunit is just such a unique game that I had to include it on the list. It's lower because for as much as I like it, there's a lot I dislike too, though admittedly a lot of that is due to my lack of skill, or rather knowledge, when it comes to the networking protocols. While you definitely don't need real-world knowledge of networks to play the game, it'd probably help you pick it up a lot quicker. My main issue really comes from the enemies in the game, which I just don't think are necessary, and the fact that mining is explicitly tied to your networking performance. To mine, you need money, and to earn money, your network needs to deliver packets. When you're doing a particularly long run though, this can frequently lead to you needing to just stand around and wait until your money refills. Regardless, Tunit is unlike anything else I've ever played, and while it's not perfect, if you're into the weirder stuff, this is a great pickup. Number 8. Chillquarium. Chillquarium is an idle game about collecting fish. That's it. That's all there is. You buy a random selection of fish, feed them, watch them grow, and then either sell them outright or passively earn money from them with which to buy more fish. With enough money, you can buy more varieties of fish, more tanks to keep them in, and decorations for each tank. A perfect game to relax with, or just leave running to the side while you do some work. It's a chill aquarium. The first time I launched the game, it bugged out and skipped the tutorial, so I was incredibly confused, and if I hadn't found the concept charming, I wouldn't have ever touched it again. Luckily for me though, I just felt something was off, so I went and looked up what I'd missed, and that was enough to convince me to go back. I ended up playing just a little bit every day for months, and I look forward every day to checking up on my fish. It was kind of bittersweet to stop after collecting them all, especially after spending so much time with them, but since I've stopped, they've actually added even more varieties of fish, so if you choose to pick it up now, you'll have even more to look after than I did. Number 7. Assassin's Creed Mirage. Assassin's Creed Mirage takes us back to our ancestors in more ways than one. A prequel to Valhalla, Mirage follows Basim's life in Baghdad and chronicles their time from a street thief through joining the Hidden Ones while dealing with the constant hauntings by a genie. It also returns to a more traditional style of gameplay over the heavy RPG focus of the last games, with much more emphasis on straight assassinations and removing the level restrictions on combat. A shorter, tighter style than the more recent games, and one which I very much appreciated returning to. People who know me know that I love the Assassin's Creed series, but they also know I really don't like the newer games. I made a tier list a few years ago, and you can literally watch my opinion on the games get worse over time. While there's aspects of Origins and Odyssey I like, overall I very much dislike their RPG focus, and this got even worse with Valhalla, one of the few games in the series I didn't even manage to finish. Mirage then was a breath of fresh air, removing all the bloat which had accumulated over time and putting us back in control of an actual stealth-focused assassin once again. It even manages to have a pretty cool story too, though I'll admit I never much cared for the actual Isu stuff, but everything with Basim, Nehal and the genie before that was great. If you liked the old games and haven't played one in a while, you're almost certain to like this, but if you didn't like them, or you're just burned out on the Ubisoft formula as a whole, it won't do anything to change your mind. Number 6. Octopath Traveler 2. Octopath Traveler 2 follows the first game with another set of 8 characters to journey with throughout a new world. A more modern setting this time, rather than the more medieval areas of the last title, with one of the stories even revolving around the development of the Steam engine. Each of the characters has their own stories to contend with, and while this time around they don't overlap quite as much, there are now preset crossover chapters between certain pairs of characters. This is also a great place to jump into the series, as while it is technically a sequel, there's little connective tissue between the two games. I'm a big fan of the original game, especially where Therion's concerned, but this sequel manages to be greater in almost every way. It looks even more beautiful, the gameplay is even tighter, and while the stories aren't necessarily better, they're at least just as good. I think what keeps me so engaged with this series are the different stories and gameplay styles for each character. By rotating through them, no one part ever feels like it's taking too long. I don't think there's a single weak member to the cast either, though predictably Throne is my favourite. I just have a weak point for thieves apparently, and especially ones who can deal ridiculous amounts of damage. If you want a nice, long, well-crafted JRPG that manages to keep itself fresh throughout, you won't find any better from 2023. Number 5. Venba. Venba is a heartfelt adventure game which left me feeling ways no other game has. Sad, angry, happy, and honestly most of all pretty hungry. It tells the story of an Indian family who've immigrated to Canada all through the means of the different foods they cook and eat together. We follow their struggles in a country they're unfamiliar with, the issues finding a job as an immigrant, and difficulties in keeping your own culture alive in a place where you're the minority. You'll learn more about them as you puzzle your way through the different recipes to make their meals as they grow together in their new home. In some ways, Venba is exactly what I think a game should be. It's fun to play, has an interesting and emotionally investing story, and gives us the chance to experience life from someone else's perspective. I'll admit I found it pretty hard to empathise with the child in this story, considering how much their parents clearly love them, but that might just be my general hatred of children shining through. A decent part of me wants to put this even higher on the list, honestly, but regardless of where it is, it's a fantastic game that I think everyone should play. Number 4. Pikmin 4. Pikmin 4 begins with another distress call from Captain Olimar, and this time you're on your way to rescue him as a junior member of the Rescue Corps. Predictably though, you run into your own issues upon arrival, with your ship running out of fuel and every crew member having to eject from the crashing ship. With the help of your new dog friend Ochi, you'll be tracking down the missing crew members, finding material to power your ship, and eventually rescuing Captain Olimar, all while trying to figure out who that mysterious leaf man is while doing it. It's time to gather your Pikmin, get your Dandori skills up to task, and start exploring PNF 404 once again. Despite owning and playing all of the previous Pikmin games, this is the first one I actually finished. The only other one I'd put a significant amount of time into was the original, but the 30-day time limit always put me off, though I'd probably deal with it much better after finishing this one. In the last 23 years, I've gotten a lot better at time management, which came in handy because Pikmin 4 is all about Dandori. From the simple issues of just getting as much done each day as possible, to the explicit Dandori challenges, and even the post-game 30-day challenge, if your time management isn't already perfect, you're gonna have to learn fast to keep up with what this game wants of you. Number 3. Cozy games. Joke's on you, number 3 is an entire genre of games. It wouldn't be one of my Game of the Year lists if I didn't break my own rules, and this year that means you're getting a sub-list in the main list after the Honourable Mentions list. Any more lists and Exhibit would be legally required to show up. A Tiny Sticker Tale. A Tiny Sticker Tale has you set out on an adventure guided by letters from your father, armed with a magical notebook which can turn anything you find into a sticker. You'll use the stickers to solve all the problems you might run into, from overgrown bushes to ponds lacking in fish, and make friends with the island's inhabitants along the way. There's more letters from your father hidden around the island which you'll use to work out where to go next, and each one brings you closer to both the end of your journey and to discovering how to stand on your own 2 feet as a grown-up donkey. A short and sweet adventure I loved from the moment I started. If you're looking for a cozy afternoon, you need look no further. I'll admit I was predisposed to liking this game purely because you play as a donkey. I've always loved donkeys. Outside of that, everything in the game is as cute as can be, and I really wish I could get the stickers in real life, although I actually hate using stickers unless I've got multiple copies of them. Carrying all the items, objects, and characters around with you in sticker form is a great way of solving puzzles, and I also enjoy just keeping a crab on me at all times just so I didn't get lonely. I'll admit some of the very late game things were a bit obtuse, particularly when it comes to the Brotherhood, but if you just want to play through the story, it's a pretty chill time, and one which can get kind of emotional at the end. Loddle Knot. Loddle Knot dumps you in the ocean like the trash from an evil corporation, and tasks you with cleaning up the trash left by an evil corporation. Their plasticky, oily gunk is destroying the ocean and depriving the Loddles their place to live, and it's up to you to get rid of it all and return the habitat to its natural state. With a collection of different tools to help you, from a bubble gun to a vacuum and even a ride-on floor scrubber, you'll have everything tidy in no time. And once you do, you can breed and evolve all the different Loddles to return this alien ocean to the biodiverse and beautiful sea it should always have been. You might think I like Loddle Knot because of the cute fish, but you'd only be partially correct. I did and do like them, but outside of finding them and making sure they're okay, I wasn't really into raising new Loddles. More than anything, I just enjoyed cleaning the areas, though that actually also leads to my biggest complaint. I don't like that even after getting a zone to 100% clean, they can get dirty again randomly. From a realistic standpoint, I understand cleaning up after corporations is never finished, but from a gameplay perspective, I'd rather them just be finished when you're done. It's not too hard to do though, and it's fun doing it, especially once you've unlocked all the tools. I just wish I could spend more time with my Loddles and less time worrying about capitalism. Mail Time. Mail Time lets you live out your dream of being a postman, though I'll assume you didn't plan on delivering letters to a forest full of animals. Though honestly, I think that makes it better. It's your first day as a mail scout and you've got one job to do: deliver a letter to Greg. Who is Greg? You don't know. What is Greg? Assumedly some form of animal. Where is Greg? Not a clue. Maybe you can ask around the forest, someone's bound to know how to find him, and there may just be another delivery or two to make along the way. I'll let you in on a secret, I've not written these in order and I'm kind of running out of things to say about them. The issue being is that I like all of these cozy games for largely the same reason: they just make me feel happy. Playing them is like wrapping yourself in a blanket with a hot drink on a cold day, and that feeling is only made even better by actually wrapping yourself up with a hot drink on a cold day and playing through Mail Time on your Steam Deck, which is exactly what I did. These games tend to have some form of life lesson to impart, usually towards the end, and Mail Times hit particularly close to home for me, but to talk about that too much would be to spoil the experience, so maybe you should just go find out what it is for yourself. Pocket Puzzle. Pocket Puzzle is a puzzle game about making a pocket-sized game console which definitely isn't a Game Boy. You'll be placing conveyor belts, turning cranks, and spinning gears to combine all the parts in the right order lest you end up with a broken console. While its 50 levels likely won't take you all that long, with its pocket-sized price it's more than worth the cost. A short, lightly challenging collection of puzzles you can while away in an afternoon, which manages to provide just enough to feel worth it without overstaying its welcome. You might not think this would count as a cozy game. It's not got the usual adventure-style gameplay, there's not a quaint story to tug on your heartstrings, it's just a puzzle game. To me though, there's nothing cozier than relaxing with a perfectly difficult puzzle, and especially one that looks as pretty as this one does. There were few puzzles which took me more than a couple of tries, and while it turned out one of them was actually bugged, I managed to contact the developers and they fixed it for me within a few days. It was all round just a cozy time, and if that doesn't make it a cozy game, I don't know what does. Smushy Come Home. Smushy Come Home sees you kidnapped by a bird and left to find your way home through an unfamiliar forest filled with dozens of cute and mostly friendly creatures. You'll make your way through forests, caves and lakes on your journey and meet all manner of bugs, gastropods and capybara to help you on the trip. Along the way, you'll also research a variety of mushrooms you may or may not be related to, and collect and craft a variety of hats to show off your own sense of style. A fun package with neat puzzles and satisfying but not too challenging platforming, Smushy Come Home is exactly what I want from a cozy game. If I had only included one cozy game on the list as was the original plan, it would have been this one. I can't keep describing these games as charming or adorable because it seems like that's almost a requirement to be part of the genre, but Smushy is the charmingest and adorablest of the ones I've played. I love all of the characters, and my wife is a particular fan of the mycologist, mostly because we both like snails. I burned through the game in one afternoon on my Steam Deck, and it was one of the most relaxing days I've had in a long time. My biggest issue with the game isn't even with the game really, it's that I lost my save file after I finished it, so as long as you're not dumb enough to do that, you're in for a practically flawless experience. Number 2. Final Fantasy XVI. Final Fantasy XVI takes a decidedly darker turn than the other Final Fantasy games I've played, taking place in a world where slavery is commonplace and beginning with the murder of an entire royal line orchestrated by its matriarch. Clive is the only remaining member of the Rossfield lineage, left despondent after his brother's death, branded as a bearer and forced to fight serving the very nation that killed his family. Sent on a mission to kill the dominant of Shiva, he defects from the army upon finding that the dominant is actually Jill, the ward of Rosaria, who was raised alongside him and his brother Joshua. With the help of Sid, Jill and Clive escape and join the rebels, ultimately deciding to destroy the system of mother crystals which control the world's magic, free the bearers from their treatment as expendable subhumans, and take revenge upon the mysterious dominant of Ifrit who killed Joshua. I really like 16, but almost entirely due to the character interactions. Every now and again a game comes out with just great characters that carry the entire experience over the gameplay or story, and this is definitely one of them. The combat is interesting, mostly enjoyable, but also pretty easy and kinda shallow. The story is good, though a little predictable, but the characters are by far my favourite part of this game, and are some of my favourites in any game. Gav is a real bro, everyone would be lucky to have a Gav in their life, and the relationship between Clive and Joshua is deeply emotional and well handled. The strongest relationship though is between Clive and Jill. There's no moment where I doubt Clive's feelings for Jill or vice versa, they're devoted to one another and there's no needless moments just to mess with the audience, they just love one another and that's it. A love rivaled only by my love for this game. Okay, that's not quite true, but it just sounded like a good way to end the section. My game of the year for 2023, Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 is an epic on a scale I had never before experienced, from waking up on an Illithid Nautiloid to exploring the Underdark to fighting a dragon under Baldur's Gate. Over the course of 100 hours, there was never a moment where something fantastical wasn't happening. After being infected with a Mind Flayer parasite, the only thing you want is to be cured and you'll do anything to make it happen. Anything, including kill a camp full of goblins, argue with the god of all Githyanki, and solve a murder mystery. You'll befriend, or at least begrudgingly journey with, a selection of other parasitic hosts including a tiefling barbarian, or a half-elf cleric who may or may not have something to do with what's going on. Or you could just be a dick and kill everyone. I wasn't entirely sure I'd like the game before I bought it. I knew at least Karlach was interesting, but the rest of the game didn't really appeal to me. A similar thing happened with the 2018 God of War or the Guardians of the Galaxy game, where people just wouldn't stop saying how good the game was, and despite my lack of interest, I wanted to know what they were talking about. At least if I played it and didn't like it, then I'd have some understanding, but I didn't want to miss out on what my friends were saying was a great experience. One of the main reasons I wasn't all that interested, to be honest, was just that I didn't really like any of the character designs for the player character, but once I decided to go for a Tiefling Ranger, that broke down what few barriers to purchase I had left. If you were to ask me why this is my game of the year, the immediate answer would be Karlach. After a bit more thinking, maybe I'd talk about the sheer value you get from the game. I did just about everything I could over the course of 130 hours, and I've had people mock me for rushing it. The ridiculous amount of content in the game is insane. Dozens of quests, hundreds of builds, tens of thousands of lines of dialogue, and all for £50. Then I'd say Karlach again. Another of my favourite parts is actually the narration. I honestly can't think of another way to describe it other than an utterly magical experience. It's probably the strongest performance in the game, especially if you think about just how much of it there is. There's also Karlach. I'd be remiss as well not to mention the camp pets. After a hard-fought battle, there was just something relaxing about going and petting Scratch, or asking how the Owlbear Cub's day was going. My final reason, though, would probably be Karlach. I think what I really love most about the game over anything else, though, is the characters. I said the same thing about 16 too, and actually a lot of my favourite games are character-focused. Strong character work, or just my own emotional investment in a character relationship, can do a lot of heavy lifting for me. My party for almost the entire game was Karlach, Shadowheart and Lae'zel, though I'd swap Shadowheart out sometimes when it was necessary, for a character quest or something. They were just the three I liked the best, though it did cause a few issues in the romances. I just didn't want to upset anyone, but when Lae'zel challenged me to a fight, I had to turn them down. There was never going to be any choice for me other than Karlach. While he's not my favourite character, I think Astarian's story is probably my favourite of the character quests. Karlach getting her revenge is great and all, but it doesn't really help her. Wyll's quest has no real good ending, just about every situation ends bad for him. Gale is literally on a suicide mission, though at least you can actually stop that from happening. Astarion, though, has the best resolution of all of them, and is probably the deepest and most emotional of them. Convincing him that he doesn't need to continue the cycles of violence, that he isn't weak like he thinks he is, that he doesn't need to be fearful anymore, all left me feeling closer to him than I have pretty much any other character in anything I've played. I will give you one problem I had with the game though. It's the fact that you can loot pretty much anything you can see. For a normal person, that's fine. Not for me though. I picked up everything. I have every chest, every box, every barrel I found. And I don't mean the loot in them, no, I mean I took the storage containers themselves. Karlach was a big help for this because she has great carrying capacity. The world was a barren wasteland where no one but me could store anything by the time I was done. Honestly, a ridiculous amount of my playtime was just spent organising all of the things I ended up with because I didn't even sell them. They're all just sat in camp still. CRPGs have never really been my thing, and to be honest, I'm not sure I'd actually want to play another. I never truly got comfortable with the gameplay. There's just so many options, multifaceted systems, layers upon layers of interactions. It was all just a bit much for me, and I ended up relying probably too heavy on sheer damage and basic attacks. Maybe if I was a bit more into the style, I'd have an even better time, but even without that, the story, characters, world presentation, music, Karlach, it was all enough to make it undeniably my game of the year. Baldur's Gate 3's insanely high level of quality across every facet really does set the bar for the entire industry, and it's a bar that's going to be tough for anyone to beat. My Game of the Year pick was probably pretty predictable, wasn't it? It's actually the reason this list was so late. It's such a big game that I didn't even manage to finish it until May. Seeing as I knew I'd be late then, I figured I'd try to spend the rest of this year playing as many games that came out in 2023 as I could, and I'm glad I did, because otherwise I never would have played some of the games that made it into the list. That being said, my list for this year should be coming a lot sooner, hopefully. Special thanks to my patrons, Justin Wood, Hobbs, and Koopy Vegeta. You can join my patrons at patreon.com/Holden Gatsby, check out my TikTok and Twitter at Holden Gatsby, and follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Holden Gatsby. Don't forget to subscribe to all of my channels. If you want more, you can watch my last video now, but if not, then thanks for sticking around. Bye.